evening, everybody. And my name is Bob Eager. I'm chair of the Kent branch. And welcome to Kent branch, some of whom are here, some of whom are on Zoom. Dorset and Hampshire branch, who I guess are probably not here in person, and London, North, Central and South may have some people here as well. And I need to say thank you to Canterbury Christ Church University for the splendid venue we have here, and to BCS for the refreshments, although we're not sure how long the budget's going to last. I should just point out that parking is allowed on the road, but it's charged till 18:30, except in 8 special bays, which are the ones nearest gate 4. So it's useful to know in future. That's only recent. But you can also use the red car park, which is where you come into anything you can get to from gate 4, you can park for nothing, and that's fine after 5 o'clock. Don't ever use the car park behind this building in gate 6, because that closes before 8 o'clock, your car will be locked in. No food and drink in here, but you know that. The timings, we should be able to start any time now and finish in about an hour, a bit less, and then questions, and by all means feel free to hang around till about 8:30. We are recording, but we're only recording the speaker and nothing else. If you're on Zoom, I think practically everyone's turned their video off anyway. And we'll edit it to top and tail, the odd bits at the beginning and end, so that'll be fine. Should be on the branch website in due course. Please keep any questions to the end, and if you feel like if you feel at any point like putting a question in the chat, if you're on Zoom, do so. So that's about all I have to say. Is there anybody who can't hear me now, either with a message or? Yeah. We're just going to try and
Yeah, that's great. No, it's fine back here, perfectly fine.
That sidebar isn't on my screen.
No, that's right. It's because of the way we're doing it.
I mean, we can't get rid of it.
No, I'm afraid not.
Okay.
No, okay.
Okay.
We've had to do it an alternate way.
Right.
Right. So I hope everyone can hear us. We are recording it okay. So I'm very sorry if you can't hear it. As I said, we have had a few issues, and I think that's what's caused that. Right. So this is Ron Ballard, who is somebody who you may be familiar with. He's given talks before, and he's here again tonight. So I'm sure it's going to be very good, but I won't try and introduce you any further. Over to you, Ron.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for coming. So Bob and I have the same vintage. We both graduated in 1973. Our 50 years in this industry do give rise to some nostalgia, I think. But I certainly welcome many of the dramatic and numerous innovations that I've seen in the last 50 years. And although the 70s were an exciting time, I wouldn't want to go back. We can do so much more now. I'll start with just a couple of minutes on history, not too much old man reminiscing, but I want to just make a couple of points from that, and then we'll get back to now. So the first programs I wrote were at Manchester University, actually in this building, which now has an Alan Turing plaque on it. It didn't when I was there, and I didn't know who he was, but it's quite nice that it's there now. And they taught me Algol 60, and this was really new at the time, with those 3 structures: sequence, iteration, the for loop, and conditions, the if thing. And that was invented by a guy called Dijkstra and somebody else, and they put it in a book, Dijkstra and Hoare, called Structured Programming. And most of what we write looks a bit like that now. So I did that at university and got along with that really well. And then I got a job. And the first thing they did was to send me on a 6-week COBOL course. COBOL was a well-intentioned but misguided language because it sought to be English-like, as in add X to Y giving W. Really, really long-winded and all in capital letters. Well, we didn't have lowercase printers then, so that was fair enough. And it really didn't have those structures properly. So you had to have a go-to back to the beginning of a loop. Nasty stuff. Anyway, and I say it's misguided language because trying to make things English-like and trying to make it easy for anyone, it's just not right. Programmers need to know what they're doing and how to do it properly and precisely. But it's still, people are still trying to do it today, and it still doesn't work. So then I went on to learn assembler. The strange thing there. And I got a job porting a database system from IBM assembler to ICL. The IBM has a word of 32 bits for 8-bit bytes. ICL had a word of 4 6-bit characters, 24-bit words. So that's just one indication of how different the architectures were. But we did that and it worked. And that product sold over $1 million in its first year in 1983. So we made it work, but I certainly wouldn't recommend that approach now. And in fact, at that time, it became clear to me that this is a really long-winded way of doing things. And the C programming language had come out then, and that looked a lot like Algol, but more sophisticated and more capable. So it took me several years, but I did manage to persuade that company to switch to C. I had some allies, other allies in the company, especially over in the States, but a lot of people that were really against it as well. These days, my preferred language is Java. It has some drawbacks, but I can write things the way I want to, and it has good SQL support. Just to be clear, this slide is not a criticism of Java, but it is a criticism of the way a lot of people use it. Just one guy told me, he said, well, you shouldn't actually do anything in any class. You've always got to delegate it all to somebody else until you really have to do it. I think that's daft, but anyway. And I see that Python is the most popular language now, just ahead of Java, but I don't like it. It's probably pretty heretical, but I think the simplification of in Python of using indentation instead of begin and end or curly brackets, it's a step too far and it's too imprecise. I really want to see where those code blocks are, especially when I'm going back and trying to unpick something difficult. There are some other things in Python that wear me up as well, but we haven't got time for that. And it's, it's a good language. But I do think this idea of trying to save typing and trying to make things easier sometimes goes astray, as it did with COBOL and as it does with some of the AI stuff now, I think. So moving rapidly through the last 50 years, what's been good, and this is my version. I thought the C programming language was great. Certainly so much better than COBOL. SQL databases, they came in after the one that I worked on. Actually, they did overlap a bit. We tried to get the head of the company to let us write a SQL database and he wouldn't do it. That database doesn't exist anymore. And lots of good things came out of the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, including well, Windows icons, mice pointers thing, which went to Apple, which Microsoft sort of copied in Windows, and now I'm running on a Linux box as GNOME, and they're very similar. But that metaphor of the Windows and pointers and stuff is really, really powerful for users. Linux came out of there as well. That's good, and they also gave us Ethernet laser printers and some other important innovations. Some other people did good stuff as well. But what I enjoyed with what these things do for me, what these positive things do for me, is enable me and teams of people to build good systems that people want. And that's the biggest reward I get even now, is when somebody says, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. Happens sometimes. Again, moving rapidly through the last 50 years, there have been a lot of things that have been not so good. I've mentioned a bit already about tools needing no expertise. I've seen there's a SQL interface program, which I won't name, which actually advertises itself as needing no expertise, and that is not true. It's just not true. And a lot of the tools that need no expertise have just caused a lot of waste and inefficiency and huge resource use. And in some cases, vast amounts of social damage. We'll come back to that. Cookies and the like feature have enabled surveillance capitalism, which is what we'll come back to. I mean, Facebook can be pretty good. We've got local groups that share all kinds of interests, from knitting to music to environmental action, refugee support. But what Cory Doctorow calls Enshittification is rife. And those environments are just becoming really unpleasant places. And it's a shame, because all these things brought us a really great opportunity to build good systems and deliver good systems to people. And the last four down there conspire together to change computing from a tool to make the world better into a means of maximizing inequality by producing a handful of super rich individuals who have more wealth than the poorest 50% of the world population put together. And this is bad for everyone, including the super rich, I would say, whose addiction to extreme wealth seems to induce a form of mental illness, or maybe it goes the other way around. But it's a very sad thing to just have to have hundreds of billions of dollars. That is madness. So I wonder why I had such a list of bad things. And one thing I think that's different about software and other products is that for most products, they'll go through a design phase, quite a bit for the car, not so much for the coffee maker and the banjo. You just copy something someone did before. But once you've designed it, there is a significant cost to making them. It isn't cheap to build a car. So that means there's a real value to what is built as well as what has been designed. Whereas with software, once you built it, it costs you almost nothing to give it away. You stick it on a website and let people download it. All you've got to do is build them. So it changes the economics of the system into a real obsession with volume. And I guess that applies to quite a lot of things, but really with more conventional products, if you get enough volume to cover your development costs and you're making a margin on each one you build, then that can be a sustainable business. But with software, there's such an incentive to sell billions of them rather than 50. It's really driven that kind of huge mass market. Other things that are odd about software is that technology managers seem to find it very difficult to work out the value of products. Actually, I was going to ask just this group, how many here are technical people, developers? And how many would say they're managers? Okay. I'll try not to be rude to you. I've been a manager as well. I've been a technical director, but these days, not so much. But the thing that really has got me in some recent situations, well, it's been going on quite a long time, is that they do trust Gartner and Forrester, and well, there's those two of the big ones. And they think they're safe with the big technology companies, and they're wary of open source. They're wary of free software, and they're wary of small in-house development teams. And because that huge potential for profit is there, the vendors really focus on marketing, and Gartner helps them with that by parroting their marketing materials. So it's all about volume and profit, and if you do that in a software company, then you'll get promoted, and if you don't, you won't, you'll be out. So change gear a bit from that. The things that I look for in the products I use are on the right-hand side there. But in fact, the subjects are on diagonally opposite one another. But with the characteristics of those things on the right-hand side are the ones I look for. And I've tried to plot some products there where they belong on that circle. It probably needs a multi-bar thing, but really the free things and the things that are useful and efficient and reliable and productive and with good security, that quite often goes together. And when you get to the other side, well, there's some really hugely wasteful things of energy and hugely expensive things. And we'll talk about some of those. And in fact, we'll talk about one of them now. Microsoft Dynamics 365. Anybody use it? Okay. So I've been involved with since I retired. I've been volunteering with charities up until this year, and all of those 5 used Microsoft Dynamics 365, and it was disastrous, really expensive. But they carried on. They stuck with it and wasted a lot of money. So here's something from the Dynamics marketing materials. So promotional video finishes up with no limits. And the guy's striding off into the sunset. No limits, it says. In their documentation, it has loads of limits. The Dataverse, which we'll talk about in a minute, you have a SQL-like interface to it. And it doesn't have a hard maximum size limit, but it is very restrictive. And there's a 5-minute timeout for queries. Well, all the places I've worked, when you want to do some data science type queries and look at trends and experiment with possible promotions you might do, you're going to write queries that take more than 5 minutes. And they just time out. They used to stop it at 80 megabytes, never really complained, so they put a time limit in instead. It's a limit. Entitlement limits are the number of requests that a user is entitled to make each day. And when you look at what it costs to buy this product and get it installed, that is just outrageous. I mean, we didn't do that on the old systems. Service protection limits. It's hard to understand what this actually is. Well, it refers to API calls, but it sort of implies that your system is actually shared with a bunch of other customers. And it's interesting that every table in Dataverse has the customer's name in it. So one way to slow a database down is to put lots of them together when you don't need to. Anyway, so there are limits on that as well. And then if you want to take data out, as at least 2 of the charities I work with did, 3, maybe all of them, they created a data warehouse because they wanted to do big queries. And so they were trying to copy stuff out of Dynamics, but Microsoft doesn't like you doing that. And there are ridiculously tight limits on that. And if you copy it to a different data center and a different supplier, then you pay more. They want to keep it all there. So these are all limits that apply. Now, the Dataverse itself is Microsoft's data storage thing that it uses for Dynamics. It's not a relational database. They do provide a the thing I mentioned before, it's called TDS, tabular data stream. I thought when I did a select, I'd get a stream of data from a table there. It would be in a tabular form. But anyway, tabular data stream, they call it. And you can run that through SQL Server Management Studio. But it has lots of gaps. This bottom bit, this article in the Microsoft thing, I can give you all the links at the end if you like, has pages and pages and pages of things that work in SQL Server, don't work in Database. Quite important things you would want to use as a data manager or the data scientist. When they say subset, I mean, it's just staggering when you paged all these things that aren't there. The other thing about Dynamics is that it has severe limits on scale, and it's the only option for storage in Dynamics 365 now. If you have one of the earlier ones, that's different. It's extortionately priced, as we'll see in a minute, and it's inefficient. So this data model on the left is one we had in one of the charities I was working in, had about 50 tables. And some other metrics of that, and about 130 relationships altogether. When it was, and this had all the charities' data in it. We combined their 3 previous applications data all together. We matched it up, we cleaned it, we restructured it to make a nicer structure, and it was all ready to go, and they just had to copy it into Dynamics. We used to copy this from the source systems overnight in about 4 hours. It took 150 days, or it would have taken 150 days to copy it all into Dynamics, and it had 734 tables and 8,435 relationships, which is why they're not drawn on there. You know, I could have just scribbled about it already. You'd have had lines everywhere. And the size somehow, well, I know some of the reasons, but not all of them. The size was generally multiplied by 5 when we copied one of our tables into Dynamics. Multiplied by 10. In some cases, it was as much as 20. So the average, you could say, was about 10 times, because it ended up, it would have been 500 gigabytes. Then on top of that, and you know, that already has a load of problems, because how do you navigate your way through that? How do you get to understand that model and produce reports on it and make sure you're doing the right thing? It's really difficult. Well, it's impossible, I think. But if you were to go and buy a Microsoft Azure server, you know, buy the use of it, and you can specify what disks you want. And if you go for the best disks, the premium disks, it's about 15 pence a gigabyte a month. I think it might even have gone down a bit recently since I read this. With Dynamics, you pay, if you're a charity, you pay £30.20 per gigabyte per month, 20 times as much. This is for disk space. It's on top of license fees. Well, you can see the difference in price for doing that for a year. Well, the charity decided they couldn't do that. They had to leave some data behind. So they carried on using our data warehouse, which was supposed to be temporary. And as soon as it was in Dynamics, we throw it away. But they had to carry on using it because they couldn't afford to put it all in. In the end, it did cost them close to £100,000 a year to store their data. Amazingly to me, the IT director said, I can live with that. I said, please don't say that in front of your donors. So you've got people giving you £5 or £10 a month. Don't say I can live with throwing away £100,000 a year. Anyway, yeah, there's more data on that. So the main competitor with Microsoft Dynamics is Salesforce. And this is how much its users like it. 84% of them give 1 star. And the Salesforce used to use Oracle, just as Microsoft used to use SQL Server for the Dynamics product. But Salesforce last year announced it's moving to data cloud. And this is the reason that the executive vice president gave. He said, when you're constrained to Oracle as your underlying storage mechanism, you're going to run into things like, it's not really great for unstructured data. It's not really great for trillions of records. It's not great for objects that have thousands of fields. There are very, very few organizations in the world that are even close to having 1 trillion records. From what I can calculate from the NHS data, they'll probably get to 1 trillion records in the next 2 years. And that is a huge system. I mean, that's probably the biggest one in the country. But unstructured data, most of the systems I work on, all of the systems I work on, all of them, yes, all of them, are structured data, you know, names of people, dates, times, amounts of money, product names, all those kind of short, precise things that you can validate and you want them to be exactly right. It's not unstructured data, is the stuff that's in social media. Gossip, basically, some of it true, some of it useful, some of it lies, some of it malicious. And the sort of companies that are looking for products like customer relationship management products aren't looking for unstructured data. So they don't need that. They don't need 1 trillion records. And if anybody knows of an object that has 1,000 fields, I'd like to know what it is, because in my career, I've never come across one. I mean, if you get more than 100 fields in a table, you start thinking, is this really right? I have seen a few that are more, legitimately more, but not thousands. That's silly. But then on top of all that, how would you ever do it? You probably can't read this, but their starter system at £2,400 a month is 3 million data rows and 10 users. That's tiny. I've got databases on this thing with more than 3 million rows in the table. This one, when you get to 20 million data rows, that's 8,000 a month. So that's nearly 100,000 a year. And then request a quote for anything big. And there they put 100 million rows. I think I said for the charity one, we had 270 million rows. And we've only got 2 pricing points, so it's quite hard to work out what it is. But assuming that the price per million rows halves every time the volume increases by 3 and a bit, which is what happens there, then if you had 1 trillion rows, the price would drop from £800 per million to 12.5 pence. But it would still cost you 12.5 million pounds per month for 1 trillion rows. I can't imagine anybody doing that. And you wouldn't need to. So why have they moved to these strange data systems rather than the relational databases they had already? What they say is AI, but they say everything's for AI now. And the actual benefits they achieve are stronger account control because you don't have any choice about what you use. And it's just this pricing in all the cases I'm aware of became known to the client after they'd already spent over £1 million having the system put in. Suddenly they find they're going to have to spend £100,000 a year just to store their data. But it gives stronger account control because it's difficult to get the data out and you can't use a different database instead. So vastly increased revenue. And of course, it's always on their cloud. So they've always got access to the data. I'm not saying they look at it, but the customer can't look at all of it. And yet, Gartner puts them up in the top right-hand corner. Salesforce and Microsoft. I like this version of the Gartner Magic Quadrant. And I've come across so many senior managers in all kinds of organizations and in different countries as well. I worked a bit in the States and a bit in Turkey, and same story. They all look at Gartner to decide what to get. But Gartner doesn't test things. It's not like Witch magazine that will test 20 irons and tell you which one blows up and which one burns your clothes and everything. They don't test it. They read the marketing material. And as we've seen, that is not true. Gartner makes a lot of money, and their recommendations are always dominated by big tech. They never say, you do really well to get a small outfit into for 5 people to come in and build this for you. They never say that. They were, there was a court case with Gartner, I had it here, where ZL Technologies sued them because Gartner hadn't included their, oh, there it is, hadn't included their products in their Magic Quadrant. And they said, you know, we sell a lot of products. People really like our products. Why don't you include them? And so they went to court, and Gartner's defense was that their reports are based on pure opinion. And apparently the legal definition of that means they're not based on fact. So why does anybody use Gartner? For lots of people do. Clever marketing, you could say. Right. In January 2020, I gave a talk at BCS Canterbury, different building, but about blockchain. And at that time, NFTs, DAOs, smart contracts were not really mainstream. They were just starting. But already we knew that blockchains were extraordinarily wasteful of energy. And some of us knew that they served no useful purpose. Now that picture is an abandoned coal mine in Pennsylvania that was reopened to use coal waste to power Bitcoin mining machines. It's the dirtiest kind of fuel, produces large amounts of carbon dioxide and other pollutants. And blockchains are used mostly to run so-called cryptocurrencies, biggest of which is Bitcoin. Bitcoin alone uses more electricity than Poland in the latest numbers. It's not a currency. I mean, you can't go and buy things at a supermarket with it because it takes 9 minutes for a block to be committed. So you're going to stand in the supermarket queue waiting for your transaction to be approved before you can pay. That's going to make you really popular. So it's not a currency. And it's not, the blockchain is not encrypted. So the name is completely misleading. But gambling on these things, as you probably know, has made a few people very, very rich. It's rife with fraud.
Doors will open on the right-hand side.
No, Molly White,
Change for the
she writes a
Bakerloo,
lot about
Northern
blockchain.
and Waterloo City Line, and National
Cryptocurrencies.
Rail
Really
Services.
good, worth looking at. And she has a what she calls a grift counter, which she's got up to many billions of dollars now that have been stolen or otherwise taken from poor people and given to rich people. And some of them have got into trouble. But it's really driven inequality. But despite the unmitigated evil of blockchain systems, our previous UK Prime Minister said, "It is my ambition to make the UK a global hub for crypto asset technology. Stable coins are a form of crypto asset that could provide a more efficient means of payment and wider consumer choice." Clearly being very rich doesn't make you smart, and being Prime Minister doesn't seem to help. Okay. Now, artificial intelligence. We've all heard so much about this now. So I'd like to get back into the past again. When I went to work in California in 1983, I was very excited because the technical lead there was known for his use of artificial intelligence in this database system that we've been working on. So when I met this tech hero, I found out that the artificial intelligence was used to automatically correct mistyped system commands. And to do this, he used the Soundex algorithm. Well, I knew about that. It was actually patented in 1918 and described by Donald Knuth in the Art of Computer Programming in 1973. So my disappointment was mitigated by the California sun and scenery and seafood, but I was disappointed in my tech hero. Anyway, since then, systems have become a lot more capable. Satellite navigation isn't generally described as artificial intelligence. But I think that is really clever. It's as usual, it's not infallible, but I worked on a vehicle tracking system which used the same technology. It was for an insurance company who, with the agreement of their clients, put a box in the car that tracked where the car was. And they did it in a clever way because they gave bonuses for good behavior rather than penalizing for bad behavior. Some very bad things happen when some of the other insurance companies penalize bad behavior. Anyway, from a technical point of view, it's really interesting. And it required impressive hardware, the satellites that are up there, and the little machines that can look at satellites and work out where you are. But nobody ever called it artificial intelligence. It wasn't fashionable then, I suppose. But it does save me many stops by the roadside trying to work out where I am on the map. So I think it's clever. Anyway, I do think that we are now in an AI bubble. There are lots of people who disagree with me, but it's getting so much hype. And what it actually does is so limited that I think that's where it's going. And then one problem with AI in particular is its reliance on large language models and the cost of producing those, both in terms of massive computing cost, but also in the use of very low paid people in poorer countries. So I don't feel very happy about that. But it is a marketing silver bullet. You kind of got to say your system's AI, haven't you? Otherwise, nobody will buy it. This is just one of many things where, fake data, hallucination by the AI system were particularly embarrassing. But Michael Cohen, he did work for Donald Trump, but he's clearly not very smart because he gave fake legal citations to a trial that he was accused in. And they were made up by an artificial intelligence program. I saw this talk back in July at the Agile on the Beach conference. And this woman has done a lot of really interesting work on artificial intelligence. She's now an assistant professor at Trinity College Dublin. So yeah, it's if you've got an hour to spare, as we haven't here, that's really worth listening to. Okay, another thing to moan about. Education. EdTech as now, this is from a government website, and it's thanking Google and Microsoft for helping so much. One of the teachers they quoted said, well, these kids are going to have to use Microsoft when they go out to work, so they might as well learn it now. Can you imagine how ecstatic the Microsoft marketing people must have been when they heard that? This is an alternative view. Anybody know if John Norton writes in The Observer, and that's a really interesting blog. He's a professor as well. And when his son came home and said he'd been taught Microsoft Word at school, he took him straight down to the Raspberry Pi shop and brought him a proper computer, taught him to program. The diagonal things here are the bad guys, the robber barons, and the books there are really interesting. I read the 2017 one in 2017, I think, and it just started me thinking about it. And I wasn't really kind of aware of what was happening about grabbing all this data from us. Then this one in 2019 is brilliant, really hard to read, but really pulled apart what happened in the development of Google, and it's changed from a free search engine to a monopolistic monster. The others That's a readable one. That's good. The one at the top right has got some studies on the individual tech leaders of the biggest big tech companies. That's very revealing too. And the Bill Gates one, yeah. Interesting thing that happened, and I was just reading it again today to check this, and I realized there's a slight mistake on here. So this is about price markups, which is, oh, you can see up there, it's really good. And the way price markups have changed between 1980 and 2024 now is that if you look at the range of companies and what their price markups are, average price markups are, the ones in the lower half of, in terms of the size of the markup in a percentage, their markups have halved. The median is still the same as it was then. Where I said the upper half there, it's slightly wrong. It's the 90th percentile. So the top 10% of companies have doubled their markups. And when you look at who those companies are, it's the usual suspects. Microsoft has a 44% markup. Government action about these particularly monopoly things, but also well, the SEC in the States, the Securities and Exchange Commission, has been really active on blockchain frauds and illegal transfers of money. And of course, the FTX trial was the big one. But they've actually brought 232 cases about people who've either stolen money or made false claims, or there's all kinds of names for the kind of scams they can do, like Ponzi schemes and rug pulls, where they sell a whole load of people some token and then they disappear and take all the money. And there are so many of them. The Federal Trade Commission has been more focused on monopoly and has gone after Google, Amazon, Meta, Microsoft, and OpenAI. In the EU, they've had some good cases as well, and they've won some cases and made some very big fines, fines in the many billions of dollars or euros or whatever. And they've gone after Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Apple. And in the Financial Conduct Authority in the UK has charged one person with operating an illegal crypto ATMs. We really need to get our act together, I think. Okay, the gloom is real, but there are many people doing good work and there are opportunities to shift the balance of power. So what things have been good? Let's get into this side. Forget the notes, but there we go. So as an aside, one of the recent jobs I did, well, the job of the charity where we built a data warehouse and produced that model and also did stuff with it. We gave the users a really good search, which was much better than they'd ever had before, and they really loved it. But we recruited 3 people. There was me and the team, me as a part-time volunteer and the team leader, and we recruited 3 people to work on this. And the ones we got were all young, 25 to 30, well qualified, sound understanding of systems architecture and tools, and voracious appetites for learning. So for me, 2.5 times their age, pretty much. It was really inspiring to work with those people. They were always interested in what I knew, and I've picked up a few things over 50 years, but also they would challenge it. They would come up with alternative ideas, not in any kind of confrontational way, but as a way of getting the best solution. And we sat down and talk about it, and sometimes they did it the way one of them had invented it, and sometimes they did it the way I knew how to do it. And it was a brilliant team. And obviously we picked the 3 best people we thought out of the candidates, but there were lots of good candidates. So there are some good people out there doing good work. The Agile Manifesto, much misunderstood, much maligned. This bit I like, except that an awful lot of people only read the highlighted bit in the middle. But the bit I really like is the 12 principles Competitive, they should have left that out. That's not the only thing you want to do, competitive advantage. But I really like this one. If I'm going to pick out one, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility and enhances what the end users get as well. But all those practices do work. I first came across it when I was already 30 years into my career, and it was like someone had turned the lights on, and it really did work better than the previous project management techniques we'd used. But Scrum came along, and none of these words that are in Scrum, none of those are in the Agile Manifesto anywhere, not even in the detailed principles. And that in itself might not be bad, but because you've got these things, it made it possible for big companies to take it on and say, yeah, we've done our product backlog and we've done our sprint and we've had a daily Scrum every day and blah, blah, blah. And we've got a product owner and a Scrum master and all this stuff. And again, that was against the kind of ideas of the Agile Manifesto. Instead of getting on with doing good work, it's actually doing this performative stuff and producing lots of artifacts that you can show your boss that evidence of you working, but no working systems quite often. And although I think Scrum is partly responsible for this, Ken Schwaber, one of the joint inventors of Scrum, got very angry when he saw what Microsoft had done with it and wrote this open letter to the some guy with the big title in Microsoft. And the bit I like that sums it up really nicely. He says, the thought path Microsoft is following continues the old path of people being micromanaged interchangeable resources. Now, certainly with the people I've been working with, they were all individuals. We didn't micromanage them. We talked about what we were going to do. They'd get on with it. If they had a problem, they talked to one another or to me or to the team leader. They'd find out. But it wasn't kind of how many lines of code have you written today or how many product backlog items have you, yeah, all that stuff. So it was about the real stuff we were doing, and Microsoft has, and I've seen Microsoft so-called Scrum projects where they ignore all the bits that are a bit awkward for them. Education and training is a great source of hope as well. Well, and experience, especially from those people who've been through education quite recently. And it is a challenge to keep up with everything. And people who graduate this year will go through the same kind of path that I've gone through, I think, and probably everyone here, is that you have to keep learning. Things keep changing. There's rubbish that comes along. There are brilliant things that come along. You have to choose between them. You have to focus. You can't learn everything. But one of the key things is how to assess new technologies. And I think there's a great importance of good foundations, which can be formed in a university environment in particular. So, for me, it was this structured programming thing. There was a lot of technical stuff behind that, but, this is an idea that was new and was good and is still in use today. And it helped me to, when I was writing COBOL, thinking, this isn't the best way of doing it. When I was writing assembler, this isn't the best way of doing it. Then we get C. Right, now we can do it the way that is much easier to understand, therefore easier to maintain, easier to enhance. So that was just one little bit of something that I learned that kind of helped me. And I think every seed like that can be planted during education is a great thing. I think there is a challenge in the market model of education, if you look worldwide, especially in the advanced countries, where universities are being forced to compete for students. And when I went, it was free. My dad didn't earn a lot of money, so I got a full grant. And I mean, that was absolutely brilliant. And I think I've been useful for most of the 50 years since. So I think I've paid it back in some way, and I'm comfortable as well. But there are many things you could learn that wouldn't do it. So there are courses you can take on choosing suppliers and products and technologies. And these all have decision criteria and recommended processes to follow. I'd be interested to see if any of them say you should look at Gartner, because that's what all the people choosing software seem to do. And they really, really shouldn't. And I think with those kind of structures that are taught, the big tech companies know how that works. And I worked in sales support for a while, and I could see how they would manipulate that process to sell their product. And they would disparage source products and internal teams or small external development companies. Quite recently, one Microsoft undercover salesman, that's an accurate term, we were talking about what we were doing with the data warehouse. He was talking about Microsoft Dynamics. And we talked about how we built this thing with scripts that we could control. Oh, they love their little scripts. Yes, we do. You can test them. You can put them in your source code control system. You can know what you've changed. It's simple and it works. But, you know, they learn to disparage that, and they kind of encourage that thing. So my big question is, how can we get our managers and some of our technical people to see through the poor quality and massive cost of many of the big tech products? And now it's time for your questions.
I've got a question. Can people hear me? Okay. Can somebody just type into the chat and say, tell me they can hear me all right? Because I'm not entirely sure. I think you can. But oh, hang on, I've got a couple of messages here, probably saying yes. Yes, that's fine. Good. Okay. Let me just go. Sorry. Can I just apologise for the slightly chaotic nature today? What's happened is that we couldn't get the laptop to talk to the screens in the lecture theatre, and so we've had to run it on a different machine, and we didn't have an active camera on that, which is why you can't see Ron. And it also means that I'm apparently the speaker. So yeah, apart from that, it's all working fine. But we know for next time, we know there's another way we can do it, and we can set it up further in advance. But time was getting on, and we thought we just ought to get on with the presentation. So that's the way it goes. Right. So we had a question. Where are we? Did the charity have an architectural review meeting with Azure? At least at that level of spend, they would happily review the implementation to ensure best practices and cost optimizations are being used. Would they happily?
Well, they had a technical team which was actually part in-house and part external for hardware and networks and security and all that kind of stuff. And we worked with them because when we produced our web application for the search, we wanted to make sure that it fit with all their requirements, and we didn't want to run it on our development machine, so we wanted them to do that. We found that team very helpful. But when it came to choosing the software, and they had quite a lot of choices, but they chose Dynamics, they did speak to an organization that had implemented, no, not implemented that, but had been involved with some other Dynamics implementations. And I had some interesting conversations with them, because I said, you know, you must have run into these kind of problems before. And they're very kind of non-committal. I said, well, okay, you've done lots of Microsoft Dynamics systems. How many of them succeed? He said, oh, less than half. So why didn't you tell them that? So I don't know. It's I think, you know, the advice we got on the hardware and networks was great. The advice we got on applications was rubbish. And the implementation team that the very expensive consultancy Gold Microsoft partner put in, I felt sorry for them actually, because they were completely ill-prepared, and they worked flat out, and they were just fighting this horrible software. Here we go.
Any more questions from the floor here? Yes. I'll repeat it after you said it.
Taking the spanking which you've given us in Americans.
Well,
I've got a lot of experience of working with Microsoft for many years, and I don't really I take away all the points that you've made, particularly around dynamics, which we've managed to avoid. But the way they operate is slick. And the way that you mentioned about the third parties who were gold partners, that intelligence network. So we have found we went with a gold partner on a particularly large project. It was fed to us, went through the public procurement process, through frameworks which they manipulate wonderfully. We ended up with one which we've just binned after wasting an awful large amount of money.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say tell me it works really well.
Wasn't. I was put in there to take over after it started to try and what was the phrase that was given to me? Make it useful, usable, and used. Because none of those categories had actually been met in the software.
Yeah.
But what I can tell you is they have changed quite subtly and over a long period. But we're now more engaged on things like cost optimization, better understanding of the product, not being oversold products.
Yeah.
We tend to deal with the technical experts now, not marketing ones. So for a long while, they were marketing boys that told you that, you know, that was the way to go. And when it didn't do something, it was a feature, not a problem. They have changed a lot. So I think some of your comments go back to a previous era when we were heavily manipulated. I think we're more in control now.
Okay.
But it still comes down to the same problem that when you're doing things at scale, these technologies provide a very wide encompassing bit. And our problem is when we use third-party applications in specialist areas, stitching them together, APIs that, you know, aren't open. There's a lot of stuff around interoperability, which is the problem now. And at least if they're all in Azure as their as their infrastructure, we know we can data share between them quite simply. And it does move stuff around a lot better. But the Dataverse sucks, I agree. But a lot of their products, you know, we're finding them more and more useful, like Microsoft Fabric, which is coming through in the data field more and more, and we're going for. But we have seen a change. That old stuff where I used to hate them is now I've got a bit more respect for we're dealing more with their technical experts who are looking at what our needs are. So I will knock some of that. I think there's a historical issue in your presentation, which isn't necessarily current.
I mean, it's encouraging to know that, you know, they did work properly in some way. But what you described on the bad side is exactly what happened with Dynamics. They bought Dynamics originally from a Dutch company, when it was AX, I think, and it ran on SQL Server. But what they've done to it now is horrible. And they had a team called Tech for Social Impact, which is part of Microsoft Philanthropies. But it really, really seemed like a sales organization. And when more than one of the charities I work with went back to them and said, hey, we got this problem with this, they said, oh, well, you'll have to let the partner deal with that. When we go to the partner, they say, oh, yeah, that's difficult. There's some kind of funny library that deals with this stuff, which is, I did have a look at it. At my age, I forget names of things. Anyway, and it did just seem to get rippled down. So it sounded like, so there's 5 cases in the Dynamics world. One of them scrapped the project after spending a lot of money, a couple of million. Another one is in the process of scrapping it, but they're going to Salesforce. So I think that's out of the frying pan into the fire. But they were so angry with Dynamics and the partner and Microsoft that they are in the process of scrapping it. One is struggling on, but they revived our data warehouse because it fills in some of the gaps. You know, the team's all gone because we thought we weren't needed anymore. Yeah, but Microsoft is so big and has so many customers, it's bound to be a diverse experience. But I'd like to think that it was all in the past, but that hasn't been my experience.
Where it is slightly bent, whatever way you want to look at it, in the way they manage gold, silver partners, those partnerships, you know, when you talk to Microsoft, that's who you end up with.
Yeah.
And in a Dynamics implementation, we had exactly the same thing with ANC. We binned them after a couple of weeks because it just was too focused on what Microsoft wanted to sell us.
Yeah.
No, interesting.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad you found it interesting. I wasn't targeting anything at you. As I said, I have been a manager as well. And when I got to the point where I could go back and being a techie, and I enjoyed it. But
I'm afraid since that was a comment rather than a question, I couldn't really repeat it all because it would take a very long time. I don't want to remember it anyway, but we're going to try and do a transcript for this, and we hopefully that will work. I was surprised to see that people could actually hear that. Somebody made a comment about it actually out on the floor, out on Zoom. So that means they actually did hear you, which is good.
That's through my little laptop microphone.
Yeah, that's
okay,
right.
Good.
So that's pretty
Trying
good.
not to walk away from
Or possibly my laptop microphone, or the combination of the two.
Yeah,
because I left mine on. So these statements will go into the I'll try and put the chat log up as well, because it's got some interesting comments in it, but they're comments rather than questions. So we probably don't want to go into too much of a long discussion. We are looking at, we couldn't get in time this time, a roving microphone for next time, which will allow us to actually talk to people on the floor. There is a roving microphone on the floor down there, but I don't know how to connect it to our things. You can sort of throw it around the room. See that red cube behind you. But apart from that, I just want to make one comment, by the way. Is it very sad or not that I actually understood all of that assembler?
No, I think
I actually understood what it was doing, and I remembered what the opcodes did. So,
when I looked at it again, I thought,
and it's well over 40 years. So it's
but I mean, it certainly didn't do any harm to learn that, and to learn several different ways of programming in the first three or 4 years.
I actually got that in a summer job.
Since, but
I got that in a summer job, and 8 years later, I was able to get paid by an awful lot of money by BT for programming in it. In my spare time.
Oh well, there was a time. When COBOL programmers could earn a huge amount of money, and I was offered a very highly paid contract because I had done COBOL in the past. I can't stand it.
Anyway, I think we should probably bring the meeting to an end now. So thank you everyone for coming.